Hey guys, welcome back again. So up till now we have our application that is completely working. That is, we can add data to our database, we can update the database, we can delete data from our database. But there is one major flaw in this application, and that is it is not secure. Though you can see that we have authentication enabled, but if anyone would want, he could write to our database. That is, he can create collections inside our database. He can add any document to our notes collection. As we can see here that this is the notes collection here. Whatever you can expect, a user can do that. And it is also not needed that he's using your application, but even if he has a reference to your database, then also he can read and write to your database. And that is what we are going to do in this video. That is, we are going to create security rules for our database. That is, the conditions you provide inside the security rules would manage that how the data is read from your database and how it is written inside your database, so that your database is completely secure. So for that, what we need to do, we need to go to this rules tab here. That is, you can see it here. So let's click on this rules tab here. And if we look at the rules right now, so currently what we have, so let it load first. So currently, as we see here, that we have allowed anyone to read from our database and anyone can write to our database. And we also have a message here that your security rules are defined as public, so anyone can steal, modify or delete data in your database. So that is what I said initially in the beginning. So that is what we are going to do in this video. That is, we are going to change these rules, or we are going to modify the rules. And I have opened another tab of our Firebase console where we have the notes database ready here, because we want to refer to this notes collection here whenever we are going to write security rules for our application. So now let's go back to our rules page here. And here we have defined some rules here. And currently what we have, we are allowing anyone to read and anyone to write to our database. And here you can see that we have this match thing here, and then we have a path here. So basically this first line means is the whole of the database. And this thing here, that is match document, it is matching any document inside any of your collection. So what it means is that, so let me open our database here. So here we have a collection called notes. So this path, that is this match / doc, and in the parentheses document equal to **, that is the wildcard here. So basically it will match any of the documents inside this notes collection or any other collection which you might have inside your database. Like for example, if you have a products collection here and you might be having some documents inside those products collection, so it would be a wildcard, that is, it will match any document inside that collection. And then suppose if you have a users collection here, so that will match any of the documents inside that users collections. So if you write any of the rules inside this block here, that is match / document, like this we have written here, that is allow read and write. So it will have read and write access to any of the documents in any of the collections. So right now what we want to do, we want to target our notes collection and the documents inside this notes collection. So how are we going to target that collection? So that is very simple to do. So firstly what I'll do, I'll just comment it out from here like this. And now here what I'll write match, and then we need to provide in the collection, and the collection is the notes collection, and then again /, and here I'll provide in the document ID. So this would be note ID. And then we open our parentheses and close our parentheses. So basically this note ID means this ID, that is these IDs. And even if you don't provide this thing here, that is, even if I remove this thing from here, let me remove it from here, then it will also work. But that is not the best practice of doing things, because it is going to match your collection, that is notes collection, but still it is not the best practice. So let me put it back again. So this is the way you define security rules for a notes collection or for any collection. That is, you write / notes and then again /, and then in the curly braces you write the ID. And this note ID, you can name it anything, but this name, that is this notes, should match the collection name you are targeting. Since we are targeting this notes collection here, so we are providing it notes here, but this note ID, you can name it as in what you like, it doesn't matter. And here inside this block of code, we are going to define our security rules. So now what I'll do, I'll allow read and write access to only the users who are authenticated. So let me write allow, and then read, and then colon. And now who all can read from your database? Here we need to provide a condition. So conditions are provided by if statements. So let me write my if statement here. And if you don't know what language is this, it's a common expression language as described by Firebase. So we have to write rules in this language only, and it is nothing new. It is basically a simple user readable language. So if request, and here we have three options, that is read, request and resource. We'll get to each of them in a moment. Firstly, if request dot auth, we have an object here of auth. If request dot auth is not equal to null, what it means is this, that if the request object contains the auth object which is not equal to null, then we are sure that we are authenticated and we can allow reading from our database. That is reading from only this notes collection, because we are defining these rules inside this match block here, which refers to this collection again. I am telling you this thing again and again because just to make you sure that you know how to write rules. And now who all can write to your database? So we want all the authenticated users can write to our database. So we can simply write allow write if request.auth is not equal to null. So this is a basic structure of a security rule. But in turn again, the only security rule you are applying to your database is that if the user is authenticated, then he can do whatever he wants to do with your database. That is, he can read whole of the database, he can write to any part of the database, or so to say any part of this notes collection. Not the database, but he can read and write to any part of this notes collection. So this is a basic security rule which you should always apply inside your database. And now here we have more methods here, that is allow update, or rather we should start from allow create. Then we have one more thing, that is allow update, and then we have allow delete, then we have allow get, and then we have allow list. We have these five things again. So like here we have read and then write, and then here we have create, update, delete, and get and list. And these all things can be provided individually. So you might be wondering that when to use read, when to use get, when to use list, and then when to use write, when to use create, when to use update, and when to use delete. So let me clear out this thing for you first. So here let me bring this slide here. So basically this read means it is a superset of get and list together. That is, if you are allowing a read access, then the user has an access to get and list the documents. The difference between get and list is that get gets you a single document and list can get you a list of documents. And similarly, if you allow write, then the user has access to create the document, update the document, and delete a document. So again, write is a superset, or write is a union of this create, update, and delete. And as we can see here inside our security rules again, that if we have allowed read here, then there is no point of using these two variables here, because these two things, that is get and list, are already included in read. So basically, if you want to create security rules for writing to your database, you can write individual rules for each of these three things. That is, who can create a document, who can update a document, and then who can delete a document. So let me bring you one more slide here. So as we can see here, that here we have security rules, and get means get a single document, list means get a list of documents, then create means who can create a new document, or what are the conditions of creating a new document, then what are the conditions necessary to update a document, and then similarly for deletion of a document, that is what are the conditions necessary for deleting a document. So I hope that I have made you clear about this thing, that what is the difference between read, write, create, update, delete, get, list. So let us dive into it one by one. So firstly, let me comment this thing from here. And currently what we have already allowed read and write access to our database. Since as we can see that here in both the cases, that is allow read and write, we are passing in the same condition. So we can minimize it in one line also. So we can write here allow read, write if request.auth is not equal to null, and then we can omit this condition here, because we have allowed read and write only if the user has been authenticated. But in our application, we do not want that. That is, all the users who are authenticated can read or write to your database? No, we do not want that. We want to apply more conditions to our database. That is, more rules to our database, that who can write and who can delete and who can update. So let me again comment this out. So let it be here for your reference, and here I'll make the actual security rules which I want to happen inside our database. So firstly, who all can read from our database? So the first condition we can think is that anyone can read from our database who is authenticated. So let's write allow read, because we are only targeting for read access right now. If request.auth is not equal to null, that is one condition, because we want that the only authenticated user should read from our database. That is true. And what more we want? Do we want all the authenticated users to get access to whole of the database? That is, he can read any of the documents. No, we don't want that. We want that the user can read only the documents he has created. And that is the reason we have provided this user ID here. That means where user ID should be equal to his UID. So let's apply that rule here again. That is, and if you want to include more than one rule, then we can simply use and here. So and request, not read, but request.auth.uid. And these things are provided by Firebase itself. I have not written anything for this. This is provided by Firebase, that this request object is provided by Firebase. Then the request object contains the auth object. It is also provided by Firebase. And this UID is again provided by Firebase. So if request.auth.uid should be equal to, and how to get this user ID inside our security rules, that is this user ID. So it is very simple. Firstly, we are getting a document here. We are targeting a single document here, and that document is a resource. So we can write resource.data, because these are fields here. They are the data of that resource, because the document is the resource and these are the fields. So here resource.data and dot which field we want to target, that is the user ID field, like this. So now if we apply this condition here, that is, if request.auth is not equal to null and request.auth.uid, that is the user ID of the authenticated user, should be equal to the document's user ID, because the document is this thing here, that is the resource.data, that is the data is the document fields, and in those fields we want to target this user ID. So if both these conditions are met, then only we have the read access. So now we have a read access to this notes collections, provided the user is authenticated, and secondly, the resource we are targeting or the document we are targeting should contain a field that is called user ID, and that user ID should be equal to the UID of the current user, that is the currently authenticated user. So now this rule completes our read access, because we do not want this get and list to be individually written. If we want, we can write here get, list. But since we are providing in a single query, that is a single condition here for getting and listing, so why not provide read here? So that is why I am providing read here, because we do not want to handle get and list individually. So now let me provide in a write access. So allow write. So firstly, you need to think about that who all can write, or is it true that you want to handle these three cases, that is create, update or delete, in a single variable here, that is the write variable. In our case, we want to handle all these three cases individually, because we want to have different security rules for each of these three different methods, that is creating, updating and deleting. So firstly, let's write a create rule. Who all can create your document? Firstly, the user should be authenticated. So we can write it again like this. Request.auth should not be equal to null. Firstly, this is the case that only authenticated user should be able to write to your document. And there is one more case, that this user ID, and that is the resource that is coming from the user, should contain this field with this user ID, that is the UID of the current user. So we need to provide that rule also, because it might happen that a person hacks your application and he provides in a different user ID that is a different from his authenticated UID. So we can be sure by writing this rule, that is by providing and writing this rule, that is request.auth.uid should be equal to request, because currently we are getting something from the user. So we are handling the request object here. So request dot resource, because resource is the data which is coming from the user. So request dot resource, and then what we want to target? We want to target the data, and then in that data we want to target this field, that is the user ID field. So now what happens here? Firstly, we check if the request.auth.uid, that is the authentication ID of the current authenticated user, should be equal to the incoming data. And the incoming data we can get from this request object, and then from inside that we can get the resource, then we can get the data, and then we can get the user ID. So now we are sure that only the user can create a document if he is authenticated, and secondly, if the document contains a field called user ID with the ID which is the user ID of authenticated user. And now if suppose this user ID contains something else, then this condition would be false, and then the document would not be created. And as we can see here that we are providing same thing here, that is request.auth is not equal to null. If request.auth is not equal to null, so what we can do, we can create our own functions here. That is, here we are only checking that if the user is authenticated. So let's make a function for is authenticated. So function is authenticated, and here what we want to return, we want to simply return true or false, and true or false can be returned like this: request.auth should not be equal to null, like this. And now instead of writing this thing here, that is request.auth is not equal to null, we can simply write is authenticated, like this. And similarly we can copy this thing from here and we can paste it here also. And now we can write this condition anywhere we want, where we want to check whether the user is authenticated or not. So now let's look at the second rule, that is who can update the document. Let's write that rule, that is allow update. Who can update a document? Firstly, he should be an authenticated user. So if is authenticated, that is the first rule or the first condition. And now we need to apply a second condition here, and that is the user should be able to update his documents only and not the documents created by other users. So for that, what we can do, we can write here request.auth.uid should be equal to resource.data.user_id. And now what this condition means here, that is the second condition, mean that the ID of the currently authenticated user should have to be available inside this document, and these both IDs should match. If it is true, then he can update the document. So this is the rule for updation of the document. And now what we want to do, we want to write a rule for deletion of the document. So allow delete. Firstly, we want to check if the user is authenticated, if is authenticated, and we want to provide a second rule also, that is the user should be able to delete his documents only and not the document of others. So again we can be sure for that by using this condition here, that is request.auth.uid should be equal to resource, that is the document, and then the data, and then the user ID. So now as we see that the rules for update and delete are same. So what we can do, we can merge these rules into one statement here. So instead of writing a separate rule for delete, what we can do, we can comment it out, and since both update and delete uses the same rules, so we can provide delete here itself, that is delete. So now what we can do, we can get rid of all this here, and now we can also remove the spaces between or the lines in between, and we see that we only have to write only 3 lines of code to provide security rules to our database. And in the similar fashion, if you have more than one collection, that is here I have only one collection that is called notes. Now suppose if I have a collection called products, so I can write different security rules for that collections, like match. Suppose we have a collection called products, and here we need to provide products ID like this, and then here we can write security rules differently from the notes collection. Allow read, write to only the authenticated users. Since we have a function here that is authenticated, so we can simply write here if is authenticated like this. And now as we see here that for this notes collection we have different security rules, and for this products collection we have different security rules. So in the similar fashion, you can create different security rules for different collections inside your database. So now after writing all these rules, what you need to do, you need to click on this thing here, that is publish, and then your rules will be published. So let me click on publish here. So it would take some time, and now as we see here that publish changes can take up to a minute, and here we see that we have provided these rules here. And now if we run our application, so now let's run our application and let's see if we can do each of the stuff. So let me write another note. So another note, we can write it, or we can edit it also. Another note, we can edit it also. We can update the note also, as we can see here, and then we can also delete this note. But now let me show you something. Let me go back to our Firebase console, and instead of deleting here, I'll write something here, that is allow delete if false. That is, this condition should always be true. That is, no one can delete a document from this notes collection because the condition is always false. So now let me publish it. So now let's get back to our Android Studio, and let's open our emulator here, and let's delete this item, that is one more note. And this time it won't be deleted because here we see that write failed, because delete is a subset of write. So we are getting this message here that is write failed, and here we are getting missing or insufficient permissions, because here inside our rules tab, here we have defined that the user cannot delete a document because the condition is if false. So this is how you provide security rules for your database. And let me put it back here again, that is update and delete, and let me again publish this security rules, because these needs to be published for the security rules to take effect. So let me click on publish here, and now your application is completely secure. So guys, this is all about security rules, and I hope that I've explained you in detail that how to create and apply conditions for your security rules, and how you can write security rules for different collections inside your database. So guys, that's all about this video. If you have liked the video, do hit the like button, and if you haven't subscribed to our channel, do subscribe to my channel. And if you want, you can support me on patreon.com. I'll provide you a link in the description. So thank you, bye bye, tata, take care, and have a good day.